And our New Testament reading for tonight is found in the Gospel of John. We are looking at the 13th chapter, and we are looking at verses 1 through 15. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave the world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You do not realize now what I am doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, you have no part with me." "Then, Lord," Simon Peter replied, "not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well." Jesus answered, "Those who have had a bath need not to wash their feet, they need only to wash their feet. Their whole body is clean. And you are clean, though not every one of you." For he knew who was going to betray him, and that was why he said, "Not every one was clean." When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. "Do you understand what I have done for you?" he asked them. "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you should also wash one another's feet. I have set you an example that you should do as I have done for you." Good evening tonight. Normally I don't like titles or for my sermons, but tonight I am calling this message of supper and suffering, or we might call it of eating and a beating. Because this morning in my devotion, I looked at the Gospel of Mark, and I started with when it was in the 14th chapter. We started at the 12th verse when we went to the 72nd verse, and the 12th verse through the 26th verse talks about, the 26th verse talks about the Last Supper. And then later we talked about, at the end, the betrayal in the garden. We didn't really talk a lot about the Last Supper, and the end. We talked about rather the betrayal in the garden is what I just discussed this morning in my devotion, which you'll find on the Facebook page or on my YouTube channel if you wish to see that message. So tonight we're going to look at the beginning and the end of what I looked at this morning with the Last Supper. And we just read John's version of the Last Supper, which of course sounds quite different to us from what we are used to talking about the Last Supper and with the breaking of the bread and the body and the blood and all of that. Jesus' emphasis in the version in John, or what John is took from that meal, was more the servant, the serving one another, and not the body and the blood. But I want to talk about the both aspects of that tonight. So we're going to talk about the supper and the eating first before we get to the suffering and the beating at the end here. But the Last Supper is one of those things that has been so deeply instilled in our traditions, especially here at Woodlawn, where we perform communion at least once a week. And for the last several years, as we've had these Thursday night services, we've been doing communion twice a week for those that attend those. And earlier this evening, we had the drive-through communion from 5 to 5:30, and folks came by and received communion. Now, Catherine and I typically take communion here. After we get done on Thursday nights, we do communion together. And I kept mine this week, Catherine, so that I kept it back to do it with you. So we do communion a lot. And why do we do communion? It's because it is such an important thing. One of the unfortunate things about what we call it, though, the Last Supper. Is it the Last Supper? Or is it really the first supper? Because here Jesus is not, it's his Last Supper with his disciples, but it's his first supper with the rest of us, those who have gone on after. We join in when we partake of the elements. We, as I've discussed on the Sundays sermons, we reach across time and place. And when we have communion here on a Sunday morning, and we do it over the internet, I've mentioned that we join in across time and space with all those before that have partaken of the blood and the body. We reach all the way back to this first supper. Let's not think of it as a final thing, rather that Jesus is starting a new thing. He's taking the Passover meal, which is what's going on, and he's adding a new dimension to it, a dimension that we partake of each and every week here at Woodlawn, at least once a week. Most Protestant churches will do it once a month or once a quarter. But it is an important thing, and no matter how frequently you do it, it is vitally important. It is great meaning, and I would like to perhaps encourage you to think of it not, again, as something that's final, but as something that was in the beginning, and that each time and every time you partake of that, you are part of that beginning. So let's move now, because it is Maundy Thursday. Maundy Thursday services are typically very maudlin. They are very down sermons, and I'll be honest, I was very hard pressed to think about what and how to do a message and a service over the internet and to try to project that emotion. And then I kind of got to wondering, well, is it right for us to even do that? And we are all quite down already with all of the stuff with the virus, and do we really want to heap upon that? But we can't forget the suffering. We can't forget the beating, because that's an important part of this. When Gail and I were in Israel back in January, we were blessed to go. First of all, we were able to see the area where they believed Jesus had the Last Supper, the First Supper, with the disciples and with all of us. It's what is traditionally believed. Chances are very slim, I think, with that particular location. I shouldn't say slim. I'm more doubtful of that location than I am of the next location we'll talk about in just a minute. But we found, or we went there to what they call the upper room, the room where the Last Supper. It's not the same building, because that building was built by the Crusaders, but it's in the same location. And it's traditionally believed that it took place over the tomb of King David. And there they have what they believe is the tomb of King David. And then upstairs there is where the Crusaders have built this building, where they built this upper room, where people go and they contemplate and remember the Last Supper. Whether it really happened there or not, there's great power in that building, just because so many people have been in that building for so many centuries thinking about Jesus and what the disciples did. So whether it actually happened there or not, just that all of that mental power, that spiritual power, it imbues that room with a great deal of meaning. And you can feel it when you're in that room. But I want to talk now about the arrest and taking Jesus to the house of Caiaphas. And that, I think we have a better chance of the place that they believe was the location of Caiaphas' home. I think that's a lot more solid ground as far as whether it is or it isn't. And there we have a church, the Church of St. Peter in Gallia-Cantu, I'm butchering that name, in Jerusalem. And that church is built on what they believe was the site of Caiaphas' home, the place that Jesus would have been brought up the hill from the Mount of Olives to see the high priest and to be in this late night gathering of the Sanhedrin for Jesus to be presented to them. And there in that church, they have the room where they believe Jesus would have been questioned. It's a rough stone area. And then even further than that, down below the building is a cave. There's what would be, probably was a cistern at one time, but that they believed that it was used as a dungeon, and that those that were brought to the high priest that needed to be held were held in that area. And you can go down into that cell, that dungeon, and we did. And we went down into that area, that pit, if you will. And it's very much like a pit. It's not a big area by any stretch. But down in that room was perhaps one of the most, let's say, meaningful but morose experiences that I had in Jerusalem or Israel. You could feel that room down there. And in that room, they have a podium there and a book on it opened to the 88th Psalm. And when we went down there, the group of us, our guide asked for someone to go and read the 88th Psalm. And so I went over and read Psalm 88. It's not one that we probably hear very often, but there was something about hearing these words in that space, rough stone that it is, and not a huge space by any means. There's something about these words that really put a chill into your spine. And so if I would ask, if you will, to try to envision yourself in that pit. Imagine it's all stone above and below, just a small area. Actually, they built stairs in there. Prior to that, the prisoners were raised and lowered by ropes into this pit. There wasn't even stairs to get them in and out. So if you can imagine the destitute, the feeling that you have in there, you've just been beaten within an inch of your life, and there you are, knowing what's coming in the morning, and hear these words. O Lord my God, I call for help by day. I cry out in the night before thee. Let my prayer come before thee. Incline thy ear to my cry. For my soul is full of troubles, and my life draws near to Sheol. I am reckoned among those who go down to the pit. I am a man who has no strength, like one forsaken among the dead, like the slain that lay in the grave, like those whom thou dost remember no more. For they are cut off from thy hand. Thou hast put me in the depths of the pit, in the regions dark and deep. Thy wrath lies heavy upon me, and thou dost overwhelm me with all thy ways. Thou dost cause my companions to shun me. Thou hast made me a thing of horror to them. I am shut in so that I cannot escape. My eyes grows dim through sorrow. Every day I call upon thee, O Lord. I spread out my hands to thee. Dost thou work wonders for the dead? Do the shades rise up to praise thee? Is thy steadfast love declared in the grave, or thy faithfulness in Aban? Are thy wonders known in the darkness, or thy saving help in the land of forgetfulness? But I, O Lord, cry to thee in the morning. My prayer comes before thee. O Lord, why dost thou cast me off? Why dost thou hide thy face from me? Afflicted and close to death from my youth up, I suffer thy terrors. I am helpless. Thy wrath has swept over me. Thy dread assaults destroy me. They surround me like a flood all day long. They close in upon me together. Thou hast caused lover and friend to shun me. My companions are in darkness. And Jesus truly there that night, after appearing to Caiaphas and having beaten and thrown into the pit, would have been surrounded with darkness. He would have had the darkness of despair, knowing what's coming in the morning. And I think that in this time, we, dealing with all that's going on, again, with the pandemic and the concerns and the fears that we have, and as the days grow on, we begin to hear more about friends and loved ones that are ill or suffering or dying. And we, perhaps this year, upon all years, this becomes a little too close to home. And we start to feel this angst and this anguish that Jesus is feeling in that pit. But here I'm going to take a little bit of a deviation from a normal Maundy Thursday service. Because a normal Maundy Thursday service, I would leave you in that pit. I would leave you in that moment of despair. We would walk out of that sanctuary in darkness, and we would go forth bearing that sorrow. But because of all that's going on in the world, I'm hesitant to do that to you, and I'm hesitant to do it to me, because I don't really want to go home burdened with that feeling, because it's one that's haunting us all too much today anyway. Rather, I want to give you just a little sneak peek into what's coming, because you all know what's coming. Tomorrow is a bad day for Jesus, and tomorrow we will erect the cross at 3 o'clock. We won't have this normal service that we do because we don't want people to gather, but a few select of us will erect the cross, and Clyde is going to go ahead and put the crown of thorns and the placard there, and then come Easter morn, remove them and replace them with the sheet that is there, the white draped sheet. So that is what I want you to think about just now. Even though that's not the normal routine, we don't want to, we normally want to feel this moment and embrace in some ways what our Catholic brothers and sisters embrace much more often with the crucifix and Jesus on the cross. But I want to remind you that we, as Protestants, point to an empty cross, because death will not win, and Caiaphas will not win, and Pontius Pilate will not win. God will win. Praise God for that. Let's close in prayer. Loving Creator, we thank you for the gift of Jesus Christ to be the Savior of this world. Though the power of this world sought to extinguish his flame, it still burns as it has since the dawn of all time. We thank you for the mystery of your love as revealed to us through the cross. None of us can completely understand all that the cross means, but yet we feel your hand upon us, and we pledge to give ourselves to you. Your love, so amazing, so divine, demands our lives, our souls, our very all and all. Take our lives, use them in your ministry of reconciliation to a world deeply in need of love and mercy and justice and righteousness. Lord, here we are as your disciples. Send us out to do your work in this fallen world. In the risen Christ's name we pray. Amen.